Yeah.
Nice to be with you today.
Hi.
Hi.
Nice
Nice
meeting
to
you
be
all
with you.
virtually. Yeah.
Connected.
All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to our Communication Talk episode 11. Today our topic is communication principles in the unprincipled time. Today we have four amazing guests. We have Dr. Mohammad Golam Rahman from Dhaka, Bangladesh. We have Stephen Beebe joining from Texas, USA. We have Miguel Crespo from Lisbon, Portugal, and we have Ariel Sebelino from Philippine. So first, of course, I want to start with asking how you all are doing. Golam Rahman, if you can start, how are you doing in this? We all are kind of struggling. So how are you doing? How is your life?
Thank you very much. I think I'm fine. So far, so good. It is very difficult to understand everybody's situation in very different context of the world, and this critical time of pandemic. Everybody understands. Everybody is counting good days or good times to come. The next span of our life will be smoother and more interesting, more purposeful, and will be, hope will be happy soon. Happier soon, I should say, because now each and every country is facing this situation in their lifetime, maybe very critical situation in their lifetimes. So the time has come on unexpectedly bad, the way we never thought even. And we don't have any speculation even how long we'll have to go like this. The mankind is suffering, whole world is in such a condition and such a situation that we simply cannot escape from the situation. And we know, as a student of communication, I understand a lot of miscommunication also we are doing at the same time. Maybe by understanding or by knowing or sometimes not knowing a lot of things. And we are conveying a lot of information, a lot of messages. Often we don't understand what we are transmitting, what we are sharing with others. And sometimes we find we are sharing some information thought very good, very important, very important for our livelihood and to face the situation. But ultimately we find a lot of information we shared or will be sharing are not authentic, not scientific, not even useful to the people. But this is the situation. Another situation is a lot of traditional communication that we are indulging, a lot of traditional way of our habitual or from cultural values or from the even from other points of views, we are sharing a lot of misinformation also. And often we find those are ultimately risky to the people whom we are sharing. Why I'm telling this? Because in last 8-9 months, we shared through our social media, through our different means of communication, those sort of misinformation, sometimes unidentified information, sometimes very controversial information. So this is the situation throughout the world is happening, not only in my country or in my land. I understand that these sort of things are going on throughout the world. And the strength and power of social media has made us more confused than before. And often the people are not dependable when this sort of information they are sharing. Many people are sharing unknowingly the merit of the information, but often we find some intentional information is also there like that. So in this hazardous communication situation, infodemic is so strong and so established in such root that we really find uncomfortable with the scenario, So maybe Professor Beebe or maybe Professor Crespo, they can highlight more since they have proposed the topic. Then we can participate in little lengthy way of discussion. So thank you all. Thank you for participation. And it's my privilege and prestige to participate with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Golam Rahman. I'll quickly go to Stephen. Maybe you can share how you are doing quickly, and then I do have a question for you. We are mostly communicating through ICTs these days. So how are you being able to actually maintain the clarity of our communication? Or is there more scope for,
I'm doing. Thank you very much for the question, and I appreciate this opportunity to visit with colleagues and learn different perspectives. I'm doing well. I think that our title for our discussion today is an interesting one because this clearly is an unprincipled time. We are, if you study mediated messages, it's an interesting time because we are relying even more on mediated messages to stay in touch. But I study interpersonal communication and personal relationships, and it is certainly an unprincipled time when we have restrictions, when we're forced, appropriately so, to keep our distance, to minimize our human contact. And even then, when we do have contact with masks, we are an unprincipled experience of blocking part of our face. Our face is the primary source of communicating emotion. So having those unprincipled time to connect and communicate, it is a most interesting time for this discussion. So I'm doing well, and I'm looking forward to the conversation and questions about this unprincipled time and the importance of what we all study, the power and importance of human communication.
Thank you. Miguel, how are you doing?
Well, I'm fine. I'm, like most of the people in the world, and especially in Europe, confined with lots of restrictions to go outside at the times we want or need to do it. We need a special authorization, for example, to go outside at weekend afternoon or at night. And so it's kind of, we are all very closed. Now in Europe is winter, so it's kind of cold. It's not that bad to be inside because it's cold outside. But of course, we lack personal communication, being with other persons as well. Sometimes I think, when this is over, I think I go to the streets and start to embrace everyone that I found on the street, even if I don't know them, because I think that's one of the things that we miss most. I can tell you from my experience, because my mother is very old. She's 92 almost. She's in a nursing home, and since March, I can only see her through a glass. I cannot give her my hand. I cannot touch her. And of course, for me, it's complicated. For her, is surely much more complicated to be apart from the family or just seeing the family through a glass. So this is the times we have now, the times that we didn't expect 1 year ago. We could not even imagine something like this. So all humans, almost 8,000 million people around had to discover a new kind of ways of communicate. And I think that's the most important thing, and one of the biggest challenges that mankind has had so far, at least this century. And it's not just an health issue, it's a human issue on how we can relate with others. And well, I fully subscribe Stephen's view on how much when we cover our faces, we miss in communicating with others. And also this kind of communicating through screens, always there's something missing in our communication, just even if we can see our faces. So there are, of course, and Professor Rahman spoke about that, lots of miscommunication problems, but also, and just to finish, we have a big disinformation especially on social media, questioning science, giving wrong information, even killing people. And there are several confirmed cases of people that died because they followed some kind of disinformation around the world. And I think that's one of the most terrible things that we are living now, is this infodemic, not just the pandemic, but our communication. That is one of the wonderful things of being human, is so misused and can even kill people.
Yes, we do agree. Thank you. How are you doing, Ariel? I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm telling your name right.
Yeah, it's Ariel. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How are you, Ariel?
Yeah, I'm good. It's past 12 midnight here in the Philippines. Good morning, everyone, from where I am. It's all quiet here except for one dog outside in the terrace barking right now. But otherwise, it's so quiet. Anyway, I'm pretty much embracing the new normal, and at the same time getting the hang of talking to a lot of people remotely and virtually. It just changed a lot of human behavior, as you all said, changed a lot about human communication. But at the same time, it's giving me a lot of introspection for another realm of appreciation of things. I mean, realities have been so much of a struggle in terms of comprehension, etc. But I think for at the end of the day, it gives us a sense of what we should appreciate: the interconnectivity, the connectivity, the human touch, the warmth, the little conveniences that we're so missing in the past normal. I think these are all that we're looking forward to. But I think with the kind of work we have as content providers, as educators, as academics, as journalists, in my case, it's more of an important thing to really serve the public on a different light. For example, my work as a journalist has never been the same when I was doing the same tasks and functions in the past normal. But I think now this gives me a lot of responsibility in that sense, to really kind of recalibrate my work, my function as a journalist in the society. In Philippine setting, we've been struggling to really provide the public with vetted information, to counter misinformation and disinformation, which are really prevalent in social media. So the kind of work that I have now, talking to you guys, I think, and for all people watching us right now, probably would give them a sense of what it's like to feel and experience a um, a uh, a kind of work that is not concrete for other people, but I think it gives them a sense that whatever work that any global citizen has right now gives them a peep into the kind of work or the kind of responsibility each and every one of us in this, at least in this global context and this pandemic, to really do our contribution in terms of social transformation and the kind of work that we put into passionately a committed work for to be able to change someone else's life. So I think that's I'm giving you what the challenge is now as a content provider myself, as an educator, and as a journalist.
Thank you. Right, it is really interesting, and thank you for sharing that to learn that. I'll come back to Stephen. Like you were telling, you mostly you do a lot of research with interpersonal communication. So how this is like now, we are all, even when we see someone, we are in mask, we cannot see the face, and how is this affecting? And also, most of the time we are communicating through ICD. So what about the clarity? What about like the quality of our communication now?
Well, there's interesting research about when our nonverbal codes are restricted. Even though there's limitation, even with masks, and even certainly now in this mediated context, there is nonverbal information, and that's often, it's the nonverbal channel that usually communicates the relational message, the relational tone. Even if it's only text, there are nonverbal cues in terms of the use of silence. If someone sends a long text message and we send back, okay, there is communication there. There's an implicit message. So the importance of implicit messages and studying implicit messages are even more important, I think, today, because we're now restricted. We have structures in place. But I guess the message I would bring is there's still relational cues, and they're even more important. I found it interesting that in our Zoom culture at the moment, there's some interesting research about what can you learn about someone by looking at their background, by looking at where they are. Some of us have books, some of us have and so even there we're eager to find relational cues in the context of where someone is, to say what is Miguel like as I look at his background, or what is Ariel like looking at what can I learn from him even before he speaks, just looking at what he has behind him. So there's all the things we study about communication are still present, but it does emphasize, I think, the importance of the relational cues that are somewhat restricted. So an interesting time to study what we study, how people connect and communicate.
Thank you so much. Now I kind of regret where I'm sitting with a very
that's fine.
With a very dull background. All right. Since we will Miguel, you would have to leave. I'm gonna come back to you with a question. Yeah. How is this affecting our relationship with others? When we are talking with friends, or like everything has changed how we talk to friends. How many times, like you said, maybe even see family or colleagues or meet colleagues in person. How is this affecting those relationships?
Well, I think there's two interesting things. The first one is how fast we adapt to the new reality in terms of communicating. For example, my birthday is in March, so when my last birthday, we already were in confinement, so no parties allowed. So the first thing, okay, let's make a virtual party. So me and my friends, instead of being together, eating cake and singing happy birthday, we were on a virtual meeting like this, each of us with a drink, and we stayed there for hours speaking in this virtual way. So it's interesting how we discover how to transform this. For example, I just found some days ago that right now there are companies here in Portugal, and I assume other places, doing virtual parties for kids' birthdays because they cannot join. So creativity in create new ways of interacting with people even when we are not together are surging everywhere. And I think that's one of the interesting things about this. The other thing is more related with we being closer to some friends that maybe we were not so close, because since everyone like now uses Zooms, Teams, whatever, to meet, it's more in our mind that, well, I have a friend in Papua New Guinea. Okay, I usually don't speak with him so much, but, well, we are used to this. So sometimes before I go to sleep and when I know he's waking up, we speak and we see each other in our homes. And that's another thing that Stephen said. Maybe we didn't get that much before into other people's homes, and now our home is right here. So, and it's public and it's open to everyone. So I think that's another thing about privacy that we are changing. We are before nobody knew except our close friends our home. Now all the world know where we live, where we work, with no problems. That's a thing that I think changed a lot.
Right. Thank you. I would go back to Dr. Golam Rahman. So we know, like, in communication, each other's feedback is very important. And now that we are communicating with a distance, do you think we are being able to, like, channel our feedback like properly, or is that it's being affected some ways?
The feedback sometimes it is a questionable thing, but I'm not very sure when for any communication we do get feedback at all, or feedback is of course it is important, but feedback we may not get all the time. But one thing I guess, this is my personal perception now, that this situation of pandemic, that people are getting more understandable to each other. They are understanding each other more, I think, than before, because they are communicating through social media or for some by phone, or some virtual communication is taking place more and more. So even Miguel was talking about Papua New Guinea. Among about 200 countries, he mentioned about Papua New Guinea. I had been to Papua New Guinea for I stayed there for 3 years. The Papua New Guinea University of Technology. I served there. So it's very interesting. And in this pandemic, I could establish some communication with some people of Papua New Guinea, and I knew some people rather than more. I could establish some more, connection, and is more connectivity. So the point I want to mean is, it's a new culture that is evolving, and culture based on new value system, and with the communication component is so strong. Strong means because of availing this new devices like Zoom or StreamYard or Google Class, or a lot of these sort of things are going on. And as Stephen was talking that even the people who is less important and who is more important, it doesn't matter, but they are converging. They are sharing their attitudes and their ideas, and among others and among themselves. So this sort of establishing or sharing information is important and interesting in this pandemic. And we know that a lot of communication is taking place for medical reasons, for even for advice and counseling, and a lot of people are indulging themselves and they're participating themselves in these sort of activities. So interpersonal communication is taking place, I should say. I think it is maybe more than before, because previously, before the pandemic, we used to engage ourselves in office work and so many other things. Those activities are discarded or curtailed or limited by virtual or online office or online class taking or something like that. So that's why the communication and the use of communication vehicles or tools is more effective and more interesting. But the point is, sometimes we may mislead some information, we may misuse some information. That is another dimension of our communication scenario altogether. And maybe this is prevailing throughout the world. I'm not very sure about the communication pattern prevailing in the West or in European countries, but in the Asian countries, I should say, the value system is so integrated among people that they can share, and they are sharing their values, their activities, and all their practices also. So, and this sharing of their practices, and at least their information-wise, they're using or they're sharing. So this is a new dimension in the communication that you can name it in different way. And when we understand this new normal has given us a new situation to understand. A lot of people are very empathetic. They are trying to understand others, their neighbors, their relatives, and all other people, and who are facing this pandemic with the infections, and who are trying for treatment or seeking advices from doctors. So this sort of medical information vehicles or very seriously going on.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Golam Rahman. It is really important that we be more empathetic to each other at this time. I want to come back to Ariel. As Miguel was talking about our privacy, now we are, more open. So from that, I wanted to ask you, from your profession, a lot of official event management activities are being conducted online. So what about the confidentiality issue in communication medium now? We are sharing our data, your data virtually. From your experience, have you seen any challenge there?
It is a challenge for most of the journalists right now. I do not know in some parts of the world, but here back home in the Philippines, a lot of journalists or media practitioners are struggling with confidentiality and privacy issue. I'm talking about how journalists cover government officials, for example. I think for the most part of it, the pandemic has been used as an excuse to not divulge information, to not disclose information. And that is a very scary subject or an issue to tread on. I think the withholding of information at this time is makes the public more a confused lot. If the public deserves right information, vetted information, then the information should be coming from legitimate and credible sources of information. I'm talking about the journalists who are at the front or the front lines of dishing out vetted information, factual information, to be able to curb disinformation, misinformation. What happens right now, government officials or public officials are scared probably to disclose information, and I think that makes it difficult for most journalists also to disclose proper information, vetted information for public consumption. Today, more than any time, the public needs journalists or even a government that is transparent, that is accountable. And the only thing to get the message across straight from the mouths of the public officials, or let's say for the health department, for statistics, etc., is to make the journalists, or to open information and statistics to journalists. And the data, for example, that the public needs should be at disposal of the public. And as I was saying, most journalists back home here in the Philippines are really what everyone is, following health protocols, and there's really stringent restrictions in mobility and movement, and that makes it even more difficult for a lot of journalists to go on the ground, covering communities, etc., grassroots. So I think when most of the press conferences also virtual, there's the limited conversation there. You cannot even ask for more information that you would normally do when there were physical gatherings in, as I said, in the past normal. So confidentiality and privacy have been an issue for not only for journalists but for most people. So where government wants public welfare, I think it all boils down to social good. What is social good? Social good is really embracing truthful, factual information from any sources, whether you are from the government, you are from any department, whether it's a health department in this case, because this is a health crisis, this pandemic. I think what should serve as a last line of defense, and even a last line of truth telling, should be at the journalist level. That's what I'm saying.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ariel. Definitely, journalist professionals, they are definitely challenging, especially in this situation. Thank you for sharing your experience from there, from Philippine. I'd like to go back to Stephen. From in academic space, so how you're connecting with your colleagues and students? What about your personal experience in this COVID period, everything online, your communication with students and other colleagues?
Yes, with these new challenges and restrictions, one of the things that I'm aware of is how important these relationships are, and how can I creatively still maintain these relationships, even though we have these limits. So I find myself some colleagues that before the pandemic that I would see, now I call them more frequently. So I make phone calls. Miguel, my mother will be 100 in March, so perhaps she celebrates a birthday with you. But again, people that we care about, our family and our colleagues, the pandemic, I think, has made us aware of how important these are. Things that we used to not really think about. We would go see them, or we would visit, or we'd see them for coffee. So I think that's one of the things that is affecting our communication, is a heightened awareness of what we're missing, of what we took for granted. But phone calls, FaceTime, Zoom, different media, like everyone else, I've spent more time doing that and learning about that than before the pandemic. But it is our natural, it's a need that we have to connect. But I think I find myself, in terms of my own personal experience, just more aware of how important these relationships are. And I find myself so looking forward to the day when I can hug my family and friends and hopefully celebrate my mother's 100th birthday in March and make these connections, make these interpersonal connections when the time comes for us to have that experience again.
Thank you. Miguel, could you share your experience about that in like how you communicate now with students and colleagues?
Yeah, of course. Well, there are two different things, a little like Stephen was speaking about. The first one is that, well, we sort of found solutions for the problem of not being together using technology. And Stephen told something that I think very important, that we have to think about things that we had for granted. And sometimes I think, well, if this pandemic was 20 years ago, how would be terrible? Because right now we have these tools that allows us to see other people, to speak to them, to connect, to give our classes. 20 years ago, it would not be possible. So that's one of the things that we might think a little bit, how technology allows us to still be human, still be communicating with others in these times where we are restricted in our movements and in our freedom to be with other people. And this is not a political issue, of course, it's an health issue. With my students, it's kind of strange. Right now, I have traditional classes in classroom. I have mixed classes with some students in the classroom and others at home, and I have totally online classes. And it's kind of strange because in the beginning of the pandemic, maybe for most of us as teachers, we already knew our students and they already knew us. So we just changed the place and the way we continue our relationship. But in this new class year that for us started in September, it's different because I must say, and it's terrible, if I see one of my students without a mask, I would not recognize them. And they probably won't recognize me. Well, they will because I drink a lot of water, and even when I'm in a classroom, I have to take my mask to drink. And so they, for brief moments, they see my face, but not as it would be. But I think the biggest problem is to create the group identity of a class, because students don't have the chance to interact outside the classroom, in the breaks, in lunchtime, dinner time, to go outside, to just speak as persons, just to meet themselves. And I think my students, most of them, they struggle a lot with that, because they are having classes, but they are not having the experience of interacting with their colleagues and to know people and to have the full experience of being in a school or a university. And I think that's the biggest problem that I found in these recent months.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I do think, I mean, I think this semester is like the hardest for freshmen, especially. Maybe others, we already kind of have a friend groups established, but for freshmen who are just starting, they don't know anyone in campus, and it's just so hard for them to get to know other people or to make those important personal relationship with other and make friends. Thank you. I would, Ariel, I have a question about civic engagement or, civic participation. So how do you see that people like able to, maintain that? Because so you have that challenge from journalistic perspective as a reporter. And also, what about people? Like, are they being able to participate as they used to?
Okay, it's crazy. Just to have a sort of light conversation. It's crazy because Philippines has the longest celebration of Christmas anywhere in the world, so that everybody looks forward to the holiday season. So, but there will be no parties because of restricted mobility. If ever you will have a party inside your home, it should be the allowed number of people, like 10 people inside your home that should not be exposed outside. So I'm just trying to say that it's part of this all these engagements we're talking about, but this is outside work. But just imagine if this were work, and that the restricted mobility does not allow you to give as much as you could when there wasn't any restriction before that. So this pandemic took a lot of toll on not only work but engagement and involvement as well. And for many journalists around the country, it is so challenging to be at the with limited movement and restricted mobility, because you cannot cover as much as you want. Let's say, for example, if you want to cross border because you want to cover something that's really earth shaking or provocative, but with the health protocols and travel requirements, it would probably take you more time before you can even reach the place. By the time that you reach the place, it's history already. So just imagine if if this was normal. I mean, under normal circumstances, you're already there. It would be easier for you to fly or to take the plane and go to the place you're supposed to cover, and then interview people. And then in terms of interviewing people, because you want to engage people in your report, and you should also be like, um, trying to be careful about that, because the health protocols won't allow you. So just imagine your kind of report or story that you want to dish out, not as not as complete as you want it to be because of the restrictions. So what people here are slowly, are back to work. I mean, in physical office, etc., and some are also working from home at the same time. I think while the semblance of normalcy is already there, the health protocols wouldn't allow anyone to just you know do anything they want. I'm talking about the little conveniences, and that's part of the whole engagement, involvement. If you're used to, like me, for example, as an ordinary citizen, not as a journalist, set it aside. If I want to go to the supermarket, can I just go like anytime I want during the quarantines, during the lockdown period? Of course not. But if it were like, I would have a pass because I was a journalist, because I am a journalist, then it would be quite easier for me, probably compared to the other citizens who would want to go to the mall, for example. So it's going to be different stroke for different people. But I think for the most part of it, it's telling us about the kind of attitude and behavior in terms of how me, for example, as a journalist, how I relate to other people. And how I relate to other people will be dependent on how I see things as far as my work is concerned. If I were to cover or write about someone else's life in, let's say, south of Manila or up north, um, it needed really an urgent task to do that. Then if it would take me like hours or even days to go there because of the travel requirement, etc., then I think I wouldn't. It's a great disservice. That's what I'm saying. It's going to be a great disservice as a journalist not to do exactly what I am expected to do. And that kind of civic engagement, um, it's it's difficult not only for the journalist, but for the other stakeholders as well. And the principal stakeholder for journalists are the people on the ground, because that's where the action is. Not so much about those people in the powers that be, those in the hallowed halls of the government or any other positions in the offices, etc. But I think it's more of the people you want to cover because they're there, and the realities on the ground are so much important that you want people to see how they are in the experience during the pandemic.
Right. Thank you. The lack of mobility is really, of course, a challenge for everybody. For me as well. I don't know when I'm visiting my home. Even in normal situation, I have to wait a lot, and now I don't know when I'm going next. So this is definitely difficult for everybody. Stephen, I would like to come back to you. How do you see, like, say, when we come back to where we were and this pandemic goes away and we go back to our normal personal communication, but is there any long-term effect of what we are now going through, like all these online communication, the way we are now in class, outside of class? Will there be any effect, any long-term effect?
Yes, would be my answer. I think so, because it's now part of our experience. One of the books that I write is a book about communication training and development, how to present training seminars and teach communication skills. And we have a new edition coming out in a few weeks, and we've revised it to assume that in the future there will be where my first edition that was published several years ago, it was assumed that training was primarily done live and in person when we teach people important communication skills. And of course, during the last several months, that has not been possible. And so we've had to pivot and present in mediated contexts. Sometimes that's effective and sometimes that's not effective. But I think these last few months have helped us identify what is effective and what is efficient. There's always a press toward efficiency when it comes to sharing information. And so we've had to be very efficient. So we've had, in essence, a laboratory to test our efficiency with how we communicate and develop. So I think in the future, my assumption is that training and corporate messages that would have been presented live and in person with this new learned efficiency, more of that perhaps will be done in mediated contexts. For certain, we will return to the live and in-person, literal and metaphorical embrace of our friends, family, and colleagues. Perhaps the other long-term effect will be an increased, at least for a short time, an increased appreciation for those personal relationships and the opportunity to simply be with them and to be. Often when we're in sessions like this, we focus on talking, and so we talk and listen and questions, but part of the joy of being with someone is just being with them and being silent with them and being in their presence. So perhaps this pandemic has helped us realize how important that is, of just being silent with someone and listening to them. And so those are some thoughts I have about how in corporate contexts we've learned some things about how we interact, as well as in our personal relationships. And I think we will more thoughtfully, at least now we have been exposed to some options that have been forced upon us. That expands our repertoire for our use of media and the way we relate to others, both in mediated contexts and live and in person.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, we would definitely appreciate of course, I mean, you mentioned maybe for a short time, but we would definitely appreciate to be in the presence of other people. Yeah, thank you. Now I'll go back to Golam Rahman. Can you, if you're talking about persuasive communication, definitely nonverbal cues, signs are very important. And how difficult is it becoming to, for communicate, especially like for persuasive communication, present days?
For human communication, for anybody in a different situation, that what one is not ready or prepared for the situation that one has to face. So now we are in a situation where we never thought of this sort of environment or a situation will create for us. So that is, in a way, altogether is a big challenge for human communication in a holistic way. If we, I mean, if we understand in a holistic way. So the thing is, for any sort of communication, there are obstacles, there are barriers, and new pattern of communication is emerging now. So the realization and the understanding of the situation is adding an exceptionally new knowledge to our perception. So that may extend to realize the new situation, how to tackle. So when a situation arrives, then we can behave with that situation, So unless and until a new situation comes, we cannot just imagine that sort of situation by which we may hypothetically will be facing. So my point is the realization that we have now in general with the people is more understandable than before, as I think, and the human values of the human values that we have, that is also changing and already changed to some extent, because we now understand how less we need to have for our survival, how material things are not very important to us for our livelihood, or maybe the other people's situation, maybe of very miserable situation of livelihood of others who are really in need of materials or material support, that we are sharing their situation among us with our limited resources. So that sort of challenge of survival is being given a new definition of our living. So the communication pattern is also changing at par with the prevailing situation, the way I understand. So perhaps these human values, the human dignities, those will be upheld much more in our value system than we had before. But we do not know how the new normal situation is going to be among us, because as soon as the lockdown is over in many places in the world, the people are behaving as they used to be. I mean, first normal situation. So although we understand the new normal situation will be a very big lesson for us, but again, we forget that as soon as the situation changes, we go back to our past normal situation. So we don't know. So how qualitatively are we changing our mental makeup, or how physically will be translating to those perceptions to our behavior pattern. So the human behavior pattern and attitudes, of course, will be changing more or less, but we are not sure what exactly is going to be there. So as Stephen was talking about, even the classroom behavior, the students' attitudes and all other things. Even today, I had a class from 7 o'clock to 8:30 today. The students felt that we see each other but virtually, but the classroom behavior, the classroom persuasion of things, and the eye contact and sharing of individuals personal feeling and all other things, those are missing. So in our behavior pattern, that is also missing, more or less. So this is the situation, So communication pattern is going to change, and moreover, because of the convergence of media, because of the new technological devices and internet-based communication, the change has already taken place, So what even before pandemic, the media consumption habit or the use of mass media, it is in the process of changing, and because of pandemic, it changed much more in a bigger way, So that's it.
Thank you. Thank you, Golam Rahman. We have been adopting a lot, right? Ariel, I have a quick question coming from there, that you, as a journalist, you have been adopting to a lot of new ways of contacting to other people. And as for your profession, like doing things differently that you were not doing that ways. So how do you think, like, after it is over, what are the things maybe that would still be helpful, that maybe you learn now that would come handy after this?
Well, for one thing, it's a good gauge of how we are supposed to conduct things if things go back to, a sense of normalcy in the future. We don't know when. I think you've got a situation that doesn't allow you to do so much, but we're making the most of it. That's what they're saying. In terms of connection, human connection, in terms of relatability, in terms of our function as citizens, as content providers, as communicators, academics, or what have you, it gives us a certain allowance to do a reflection. And today, more than any time in the history, now is the most opportune time to really think about how we come out as better individuals, how we come out after the pandemic as better versions of ourselves. And I think for me, as well, if anybody would agree with me, I think it also gives us, from a vantage point, thanks to the pandemic, at the vantage point, this time allows us to be more responsive to the needs of other people. And I think when I said about recalibration in journalism or for any other profession in this world means a significant turnaround for the good, for the positive things, turn around of what we have done in the past, usually done in the past. This time, it's going to be more focused, more disciplined, and I think exploring other avenues of communication to make communication itself better. And I think also from more than any time in the history, technology has been tested to its limit. What makes technology functioning, what makes technology beneficial to any other human who embraced it already, is the human connection. Technology will not be of use to anyone if there was no intervention. And the intervention specifically provides that connection that allows anyone who uses the technology, not only journalists, to be able to connect to other people from wherever they are. And I think as a continuing process on media and information literacy, it also gives the public a semblance of participation in the new normal when they wouldn't be allowed to be physically present. That's what I'm saying. If the internet infrastructure is not crappy, it's better for most of the people, for most of the countries in the world, then I think it would be a happier place in terms of connectivity. But what I'm saying is that because we have in most areas in the field, we have poor internet infrastructure and struggling in terms of, because everybody uses online now because, the education has been, adjusted as well. We're actually scrambling for a piece of the bandwidth so that everybody gets connected. and that it's really very important. And going back to what the challenge we're talking about, it's really very important to connect, to be able to hear the narratives of the people on the ground. And that to me is really what matters. Where people are isolated because of the pandemic, and for other media outfits in the Philippines, which have folded because of, obviously for resources, for a lot of factors, then you're shutting out that opportunity for the public to get information, when you would have wanted a pluralistic media or a pluralistic society where everyone gets a fair share of information. But because of the pandemic, that's precisely giving us that limitation, not only movement, but also access to information, right? So I think moving on, as I said, wherever you get the chance of really making things, of normalizing things in these abnormal times, unprecedented and extraordinary times, then it would help to really check on someone. And that's part of the whole altruism we're talking about in these very difficult times. What makes any crisis, such as health crisis, the pandemic, what makes it bearable for most of us is not only because we want to feel or hear that humor somewhere else from the other person, and we want to hear the silence of the other person, but for most of all, we want to see that we're able to take care of each other. And I think that should be provided by any profession in this world, by doctors, by content providers, by journalists, by academics, by anybody who is in the business of taking care of humanity.
Thank you. Thank you, Ariel. And thank you for your work, for what you do in this situation. Bringing voice to people who are isolated, focusing on them, that is what we need. So thank you. Thank you for your work. Stephen, so I wanted to come back to you. Keeping physical distance definitely has a different meaning in different community, different culture, different society. So in now that we, physical distance has a different meaning, like we are required to do it. We have to do it. Sometimes we are not doing it. So how is it now seen? How do you observe that? The concept of physical distance, and how do we see it now in your community? How do you see it now?
Well, I think you're exactly right, is that the way we interpret our nonverbal messages, including space and distance, it is culturally specific. Not all cultures interpret space and distance and other nonverbal cues the same way. What I do believe is true is that all cultures do use and interpret nonverbal messages. So while the cultural interpretation certainly varies from culture to culture, the element of nonverbal messages, the element of, as you specifically note, our use of space and distance, is always there. So I think the fact that we have this constraint, this external constraint now, in some cases literally legislated as to how close we can be to each other. I think, and again, I'll go back to the concept of increasing our awareness, that because we now talk about something we didn't used to talk about, because now legal entities are now saying you should no longer be within 6 feet of someone. We are now aware of that. And as we see in media coverage and perhaps in our own communities, some people don't like that. And so that is that very explicit use of nonverbal communication, of distance, increases our awareness, and some see it as a major infringement up on their own rights. And so you have this tension between your own rights and the needs and interpretation of others. So we're learning about how we feel about this and how we might process that in terms of our response to others. So I think it's an interesting time to study communication especially since we now have, it's almost like we now have a control group study of what it's like to be not in pandemic and now in pandemic. And we have the independent variable of these constraints on distance and gathering and touch and hugs. And so it's an interesting opportunity to study it both from a social science perspective, from an empirical, whether you study it empirically or more qualitative methods. And even some of our colleagues who study critical cultural approaches to communication would say, who gets to determine those roles and relationships? So I think there are multiple ways or multiple methods of studying communication, especially with this specific requirement of space and distance, can help us and is a wonderful opportunity for study. And so that would be my hope for the future and I know that's happening. I know for my own colleagues in communication, increasingly studies about how the pandemic is affecting teaching, but not only teaching, but just our own relationships and our own sense of identity. So I think it's a wonderful opportunity to learn more about us and how these constraints, how this now control group with a limitation of independent variables can give us some interesting effects upon the dependent variables of the way we interact with others.
Thank you. I know we are over our 1 hour limit, but can I have one more question, Stephen, to you? So yeah, definitely we have like a lot of scope. Like now we need to do a lot of research on that. So after we do that, we get to learn a lot more. And for future, when we have another challenging situation, are you going to be like, oh, we went through that and we learned all of that, so now we are better equipped. We would know how to better communicate now, or we would still face challenge. How do you see that?
For just a moment there, I lost the signal. I think it's an opportunity for study. And I think learning and life is iterative. We learn along the way. So this experience is, no, I don't think we'll ever get to a point where we say, we know all about that now because we went through that pandemic in 2020, 2021. But I think there are lessons to be learned, and I hope we learn those lessons. But in every research study, there's a literature review, which looks at what have we done in the past? What is our current knowledge? But then there are always those new questions that build upon the past, that build upon our literature review, and then we talk about our method or our approach to studying that. So I don't think we'll say, nope, we understand that now, we've had that experience, but I do hope it's something we learn from, and it's a wonderful opportunity to help us learn about what happens both in a pandemic and very soon, perhaps within weeks or months, when we're no longer in a pandemic.
Thank you so much. Thank you all. I want to personally thank you all for your time, and it has been a privilege for me to share this time with you all, meeting you all. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a nice day or night.
Thank you, colleagues. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Keep safe, everyone. Nice meeting you all virtually.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, new interaction to each other, and perhaps